Welcome everyone. Today I have quite the spooky story for you. It is a Halloween special after all, and what could be more fitting than the harrowing tale of Skullgirls, and how it destroyed a company and the man behind it in the process. Mike Zymont, or Mike Z for short, was a programmer and lead design director at Lab Zero Games, the infamous studio where our story now takes place. There he worked primarily on the 2D tag team fighting game Skullgirls, which released on April 10th, 2012, after being successfully crowdfunded on Indiegogo. Yet it had remained a staple of the company to this very day thanks to modern ports for new consoles and their spin-off title, Skullgirls Mobile. In addition, he worked on another game called Indivisible, but unfortunately its promised additional content would soon disappear, along with its studio. The question is, what could possibly be so bad that it caused the fracturing of an entire company over a decade in the making, seemingly overnight? Join me as we learn all this and more in the unsolved mystery of Mike Z, Skullgirls creator. Things wouldn't really start to go downhill until June 5th of 2020. Only 2 weeks after the tragedy in Minneapolis, Mike Z would drop a quote synonymous with the BLM movement during a Skullgirls livestream.
That's suffocating, is what that was.
And still,
Suffocating.
Still.
Would it be fair to say that you can't breathe?
Yeah.
Alright, Gelato. You got a chance now.
Now, as an African American, born and raised, this is absolutely 100% not funny. And thankfully, Mike Z had already apologized for this the same day. But even better yet, a day before the incident occurred, he had put into place a donation for 3 days worth of the Skullgirls mobile revenue to go directly towards the Black Lives Matter charity. It's clear he sincerely apologized for the severity of his actions, because even Sonic Fox was willing to accept his apology and vouch for his character and consistency on these issues. He's the realest dog Nick I know. I censored that for ad revenue, okay? I swear I'm black. Now that controversy was a spicy joke on a live stream it probably shouldn't have been on. There isn't much else to be said because, well, not much came of it, given how quickly he apologized and his upstanding history in the community. However, what would transpire next, just a few weeks later, would make anyone's skin crawl. On June 29th, 2020, BunnyAyumi, a Twitch streamer and ex-reviewer model, which I've only recently learned is a model who poses in provocative swimsuit and lingerie for magazines and photo books marketed towards men. Anyways, she would post about her DMs with Mike Z and how he was both creepy and demeaning. Also that she would no longer be playing Skullgirls as a result. She began the conversation with Mike by thanking him for incorporating lesbian BDSM into his video game. I don't believe they had any prior conversations to this, so this would have been their very first interaction online. And because of how integral the debate around these DMs are to the rest of the story, and the fact that this situation is currently referenced in an ongoing lawsuit, I'm going to read all of it. It's not very long or graphic, but it is pretty cringe. If you've already heard it or don't care, then I suggest you skip to this timestamp. Thank you for making a video game where there's BDSM Yuri tries to figure out how to respond to this. I'm glad you enjoy it? Yeah, question mark seems appropriate. There's a lot less of that type of thing than there was originally, because even fewer people would have taken it seriously otherwise. Witness Philia's unused timeout pose, which you can look up online. That's non-committal enough. Let's see who this person is. Oh, I think it's the lady who was streaming the game recently that I mistook Bun Jupiter for. Visits the Twitter page. Whoa, you actually have a catchlight/eye light? That's some serious production value. I have so many questions I want to ask that I'm definitely not going to ask. I'm happy Skullgirls is fun for you. This one? I think it's awesome. I understand though. I like Dead or Alive a lot, but it gets a lot of negative feedback for being too sexy. I love Philia though. Yup, I've played Skullgirls 3 times on stream. I really love the style, and played Elisa's story today, so that's why I thanked for the Yuri BDSM. Ask away! I'm a fan of the game so far. It's really cool and fun. for sure. Ah yes, we had to add all the mummy wraps to Eliza's getting thrown frames, or we wouldn't have gotten the right rating. Also some foam in her bath. Strangely, they said nothing about her other story mode art. Ask the questions. Well, okay. Are you putting on the high voice like lots of Japanese ladies do? What brought you to Skullgirls anyway? I guess you've embraced the thirst culture, but like, isn't it weird? As definitely not anyone's fantasy, I don't know how I'd feel in your place. Did you start out with that as a name? I'm genuinely curious. My voice is real. It gets higher pitch when I'm excited though. I'm cursed with it. I get that question a lot. I like fighting games. I've had an interest since I was a kid and wanted to revisit some for nostalgia. I found Skullgirls through recommendation from my fans. It doesn't bother me. Thirst is human nature. I started as a gravure style model online and did sexy modeling for maybe 3 years or so before retiring. I retired a year ago to pursue Twitch streaming. I'm used to thirst stuff from my job and I'm a huge fan of hentai artists and the culture, so it really doesn't bother me. Well, sorry for asking the dumb common questions. I know some other ladies like that. I bet it's annoying to get asked to put your parents on the phone. I suppose thirst definitely helps sub count, and probably validation, if external validation is necessary. I'm embarrassed enough streaming at all, and I dislike people. So I feel unqualified speaking here. Huh. I'm sorta curious what your family thinks of it, but that's dangerously close to the coy, what does your boyfriend think, probe of you single? It's just a world I'm so unfamiliar with. Gravure, the printing process? Oh, Google helped. You're aware of like the prevalent problems with sexism in the FGC, I assume. Sorry about that in advance. Although the Skullgirls community in particular is better about it. Anyway, I don't mean to bother you. You're just kind of fascinating and unfamiliar. Well, that's a good weird ending. I'm sure you get messages from humans with penises asking that kind of stuff pretty regularly. So if you prefer, how about I acknowledge the brain inside the lady? It takes a lot of skill and cunning and a certain amount of both integrity and ruthlessness to succeed at pretty much anything. So, calculating successful person who owns herself, what's your end goal? Is streaming sustainable? Do you want to own a tech company? Or manufacture solar cells? Or grow cute flowers? Or what? I'd like to know what to prepare to invest in. The validation comment was very uncomfortable and demeaning. Can you imagine this conversation with a man in the FGC? I mean, maybe. If I started the conversation about gay BDSM porn and made oil ear massage ASMR videos, yeah, I could see that happening. Realistically, this conversation would never happen with men in the FGC, because they're just playing fighting games. Look, I don't care what you do. Okay, empowerment and all that. Get the bag. But let's not pretend that those messages had anything to do with the fighting game community. He was specifically asking about your line of work, which you described as sexy modeling, and he said it right after you clarified thirst and hentai culture didn't bother you. That's the context, not in the framework of fighting games or anything like that. I don't see the perceived double standard here, I'm sorry. However, Mike does come off weird in these messages. Don't get me wrong. There's the brain behind the lady and humans with penises line that a lot of people were not comfortable with. And at first glance, I totally get it. But overall, they don't read as your usual Bob's and Vagine messages you'd expect from your average horny poster. They read more as, oh, I'm one of the good ones, our nice guy archetype, right? As he's asking about her aspirations and attempting, albeit poorly, to show genuine interest in her work. Even more still, the emoting in text, overly descriptive, and blatantly honest nature of his responses lead me to think there might be a little bit more going on here than just a guy with influence creeping on a girl, who arguably has more influence than him because she has 1 million followers. But thankfully, this isn't a dick measuring contest. Lucky for us, in November of the same year, Mike Z would finally go and get an official diagnosis for autism spectrum disorder severity level 1. More specifically, the type of high-functioning autism formerly known as Asperger's syndrome, which is partly characterized by impaired social communication and interaction, meaning that he has a harder time understanding what would or wouldn't be an appropriate topic, among other related issues. This, of course, is not an excuse to harass or demean anyone just because you're autistic, but if there's ample reason to suggest that that might not have been your genuine intent, then I think that's worth consideration. Looking back on some of the messages with this newfound perspective, some things may make more sense. Like how he acknowledges there might be questions he's curious about, but isn't certain if they're appropriate until he gets the green light. Or take the most frequently spread screenshot about humans with penises. I never even considered this, but when I reached out to one of my friends with autism to get his opinion, they immediately mentioned how the humans with penises line could have been a way of communicating his point while attempting to refrain from being transphobic after learning this kind of measured language from a separate altercation. or the fact that he was so self-conscious about sexism and crossing boundaries that by clearly defining them in extreme detail, he ironically did exactly that. Now, obviously, that is the most charitable view of it. So, on the other hand, he could have meant to flirt with her, but was unsure of the appropriate way to go about it while probing for any hint of reciprocation. I'm not Mike Z, so I'll leave that interpretation up to you. But here's how his coworkers responded to these same messages right after they leaked. These messages are actual Slack conversations from the company that have been made public ever since Mike's countersuit with ex-employees. Mariel, the lead animator at the time, stated in response that if we were dealing with the case of abuse or harassment, I think it would be important to say something and show the community what steps we've taken. But for this? While the comments are absolutely not appropriate, I don't take this to be predatory behavior. I don't know. It's hard because people are still hurt regardless. Oh, and to clarify, I think we need to take steps internally, but I'm unsure if we need to make a show of it publicly. To which both coworkers Robert and Emily co-signed and agreed that it lacked any predatory motive. Also, the ex-CEO of Lab Zero, Francesca, mentioned that she thought Bunny had baited Mike, and knew he didn't mean to demean her, but was sure she got actual sexual harassment DMs that were way worse than what Mike told her. Mike told me he apologized to her both then, which she cut out, and again now, which I think is good. Yeah, that's not cool. She's trying to paint him a certain way. After Mike posted a lengthy apology to Bunny, explaining his autism, struggles with communication, and willingness to take the fall in place of his team and the Skullgirls community, Bunny deleted her original call-out and felt like she should have handled it differently. Probably by talking it out in private before posting it to her 1 million followers, but that's anyone's guess. On an unrelated note, while researching, I noticed Bunny would later be accused of emotional abuse by her girlfriend and lying about her business partner behind their back, which started after others called her out for petty gossiping and lying behind the scenes. Nevertheless, that wasn't the only post Mike would have to respond to. It was only the first of many. Another notable call-out would come from the cosplayer Carbonbae, who has me blocked on X.com, so I don't really care. Just kidding. Her first post immediately followed Bunny's, where she agreed with her without even looking at it because she has her own history with Mike.
This is like my 20 billionth take. I have not yet read Bunny's DMs. I don't know what Mike said to her. I'm sure it was shitty, and I know that because Mike's been making weird sexual comments at me in and out of cosplay at fighting game events for actual years. And I've been writing a lot of it off because when I tell people, they're just like, oh, he's kind of like that, I'm sorry. And like, yeah, he is kind of like that, and he's kind of not changing for the past 5 years, y'all. And, like, neither is anyone else in the fighting game community, and I think a lot of it is because when I tell, like, my male friends or other TOs what's happening, they just kind of don't do anything with that information. If you find out that one of your friends is being absolutely weird or creepy to females in the community, you need to call them on it and actually hold them accountable. And it isn't just women in the community when your friends are harassing people. It's any of their homophobic, transphobic, racist, sexist comments that they're making that you need to embarrass them for and call them out on so they can be better people about it. Because, like, I'm sick of talking about this. If I could never talk about this for the rest of my life, I would be ecstatic. Like, y'all need to take some of the burden off of the people who are getting harassed at every single event they attend on and offline.
She didn't personally explain anything in detail, however, until August, when all the employees started leaving Lab Zero. In that account, she recalls being friends with Mike for a long time, but every time they'd have a conversation, there'd always be one weird sexual comment made towards her. An example of which was him allegedly commenting at an event that he'd want to make a collage of her selfies so he could get off to them. If that is the case, that is absolutely inappropriate and should be addressed. Again, she has me blocked, and the one person she linked to vouch for her story just looped it back to her, so I ended up getting no details whatsoever. And Mike is currently in an ongoing lawsuit, so you see where we're at here. So I have no idea what any of the other alleged comments were, or how their relationship functioned, or why she enjoyed talking with him at events, if he always without fail made a weird sexual comment at the same event. Was there some kind of mutual understanding to ever be considered a longtime friend? Did he ever apologize for anything? Or nothing? Or just this time in particular? Well, I've been reviewing this evidence for over a month now, and I came across quite the interesting discrepancy. In June, Carbonbae mentions the incident at CEO Taku. That's the one we just read about, and she asks BananaGod7 to confirm the story. He recalls that after they both loudly criticized Mike for his comments, he laughed it off while saying sorry, before moving on to another topic. Carbonbae liked both of those tweets explaining it. When she tells the story again in August, there's a noticeable difference. She says, he could have just apologized. 2 separate people have told me they asked him to apologize to me. Instead, he threatens the livelihood of everyone at Lab Zero and Hidden Variable. Did you catch it? That's right. I knew you would. I'm so proud of you. Someone here is lying, because her friend, who was also there, who she cited as a source and agreed with, said he already told her sorry. She doesn't just say his sorry was insufficient or inadequate, it simply doesn't even exist anymore. Now, I'm not in the business of policing your friendship with Mike, okay? So how am I supposed to trust your framing of this when you're now removing the fact that he apologized and you've only addressed it publicly each time he's being dogpiled? I would have loved to clear that up ahead of time, but for obvious reasons, I can't. I think that's a very fair concern to have when the public has no other context to the alleged conversations with Mike, and your one example with any kind of detail is changing by the month. So until that's cleared up, there's not much else to say. On to the next story, which comes from a previous employee, Beezul. And I gotta tell ya, the amount of buzzwords Beezul uses would embarrass even Barry B. Benson.
Sussy bata.
Try saying that 5 times fast. They accuse him of scapegoating, gaslighting, actual physical threats, racist remarks, and described him as being a white man in power who refused to see their reality. I mean, to be fair, when someone thinks of a racist gamer, this would definitely be final boss material. Honestly, I was more interested in, the alleged threats of violence more than the story we got about racism, but I guess that didn't warrant any details. Couldn't fit that one in the word count. Beezul retold an interaction with Mike where he jokingly mentions Beezul looked like a thug, so he was surprised they were excited at a Smash Brothers announcement. For context, Beezul describes himself as a bald Latino who wears Nikes, gym shorts, anime tees, and has a large tattoo on their arm. Wait. After giving a personal lecture on critical race theory, this for some reason didn't make Mike less critical of races, because he would allegedly repeat the joke 2 more times for good measure. I explained to him that this profiling was really hurtful. I told him how the police have harassed me in LA and OC, and that I fear my life sometimes because I get profiled as a thug. He shrugged off my life and said it's not a big deal, and that I was exaggerating, and that people don't actually do that or think like that. If you actually care about this, that's completely fine. That's fair. But when I see an allegation where threats of violence in the workplace is treated as a footnote to lecturing your boss on systemic racism, while also mentioning how you yourself wanted to assault him over a disagreement in the same post, I can't help but laugh at the irony. If he's actually physically threatening people, please elaborate on that. I don't care that he's a hugger or that the guy with Asperger's doesn't understand the intricate nuance of stereotypes, however funny it might be. But I agree he should definitely be better at communicating with staff, especially if they're this passive-aggressive. And while an effective HR department would be nice, most small companies unfortunately do not have the budget for it. But I don't think him joking and then clarifying he didn't mean to be racist really warrants a 15-tweet rant in the first place. The people running the company clearly did not agree on the severity. Considering that this thread has already been deleted though, I doubt we'll hear more, but I'd be remiss not to include it. A day after everyone's stories emerged on June 30th, a statement signed by members of the Skullgirls community would call for Mike's indefinite ban on commentary and a 2-year suspension from all competition. This was scheduled to end on July 30th, 2022. So, it's technically 2 years and a month, but I digress. Mike's history of problematic behavior, including the "I can't breathe" joke a month earlier, and all the stories we just went over, were the main citations for this ruling. Comments made by important figures like Sonic Fox and Ultra David would ultimately solidify the position of many in the community. However, it's important to note that this was definitely not met with unanimous applause. Many people, unsurprisingly, saw this as a local community bullying an autistic man for being awkward. Bunny, who was likely the main reference in this decision, was even ratioed several times in her own thread with this exact sentiment. And after reviewing many of these instances myself, a common theme is definitely a lack of clarity and communication. There's no questioning that. Whether it's the awkward DMs with Bunny, his friendship with Carbonbae, or the alleged treatment of employees, there's no shortage of crossing boundaries and social norms. Could this possibly be because he's autistic? Well, considering that that's literally the textbook definition of autism, I'm not quite sure yet. Because on the other hand, it could just be a front for him to perpetuate this behavior for years without anyone being the wiser, giving him a free pass to harass women and minorities at his leisure. Just kidding, that's fucking stupid. And for the people saying,
"Oh, that's not a valid excuse."
excuse me? It's a fucking neurodevelopmental disorder. Of course it's a valid excuse. Autism is normally diagnosed at age 2. Anyone want to guess when Mike Z got his? At age 40. That's going to cut off a significant amount of crucial early developmental therapy. And in hindsight, maybe he shouldn't have been as vocal if he had these issues, and should have taken more steps to prevent any misunderstandings. But understand that autism is also on a spectrum, so just because you might have it, and don't find this particular thing to be a problem, doesn't mean that's the case for everyone. Because just saying, that's not an excuse, isn't going to magically stop anyone with autism from struggling in a conversation. We took a little detour from the main timeline, but I didn't see anyone here seriously discussing this, so I felt like I had to here. Back to the story. After they banned Mike Z, there was a 2-month period of peace for the Skullgirls community. Little did everyone know, that was only on the surface, and things were about to get a lot worse. On August 23rd, after an apparent internal investigation, employees started releasing statements of their resignation from Lab Zero Games, which continued into the following day. The main issues being Mike's unwillingness to leave the company and the unsafe work environment perpetuated by his behavior. All things we saw previously. We'd also receive far more context into the internal workings of the company, like how Mike was able to secure 100% of the shares in March, or how Alex Ahad, the previous co-owner, was ousted from the company and received a sizable settlement after suing for wrongful termination. Coincidentally, the lead animator Mariel and the CEO Francesca would also file for wrongful termination against Lab Zero, this time for being removed from the board of directors by Mike. This is how we'd eventually end up with roughly 200 pages of Slack screenshots accompanied with a full explanation from Mike Z. Initially, I was wondering why Mariel would even bother with a lawsuit, having left both voluntarily and publicly for the alleged sexual harassment and abuse of power. And there's only 2 explanations I can think of that make sense. She either filed the wrongful termination suit before drafting her public resignation, but after being removed from the board, which makes a lot of sense, or she saw how previous lead creative director Alex Ahad received a decent settlement after his wrongful termination suit, and now she was seeking recompense for her troubles. The last one is of course speculation, but I can't rationalize the start of this back and forth litigation if money isn't somehow a factor. Now, as far as the statements published, a look on the inside could create some confusion. Because if you witness the trajectory of the internal conversations held by the employees in the immediate wake of Mike's controversies, none of them would foreshadow the details outlined in their resignations. Let me read a few examples so you understand what I'm talking about. From the previous CEO Francesca, who he's known since 2005, stated, "He's also made inappropriate comments to me in the past, which he defended as feeling comfortable enough with me as a friend to be able to say them. But I told him they made me very uncomfortable and asked him to stop. And he did stop. But yeah, he isn't able to figure it out on his own when he said something that went too far." According to Mike, they would exercise together, go to parties and lunch together, and Mike even attended her wedding, visited her in the hospital, and gave her money when she needed a car. At least according to him, this was more than a work relationship. Another example comes from the coworker Emily Young, who says, "Mike Z, on the other hand, has a bad trait that keeps leading him to those situations, but is genuinely apologetic and does try. But the underlying issue is he keeps getting to that point, and I don't know how to get him to not do that." Thus, the conundrum. Is the problem that he doesn't try? No. But the problem is what he is trying is not preventing him from getting to a separate issue that is along the same vein. Another coworker, Robert, said that he believes that Mike feels really bad about how he is, but he seems to be very fatalistic about ever changing. My question is, how do we get from "my fear is what the public will latch onto and ruin his life over," and telling Mike in private, "I think we should always strive to resolve things privately. I hate this internet call-out shit," to a Twitter post saying, Mike has a pattern of hostility, insults, threats, lying, and harassment 2 months later. He's known Mariel since 2010, and somehow her opinion of him changed drastically from still wanting to work with him at a new company and considering him a friend, to 2 weeks later saying, I think I just hate him now. LOL, oops, I can't delete messages. Well, the answer is obvious because it's in the call-out post. I mean, just fucking read it, right? I'm here today because we had asked him to leave over these behaviors. He apologized for his behavior and said he would, but has now turned around and said he won't, all the while continuing to intimidate and bully employees. Mike is the 100% shareholder of the company, and as such, it is his right to stay if he wants to. So the difference here between making it public and handling it in private is that now Mike didn't want to leave the company, and also removed everyone who demanded it from the board of directors. Because when you have 100% shares of a company, you then own the company and can do whatever you want. We will be addressing the inappropriate workplace conduct alleged by Mariel and everyone else in a moment, but just hang in there. I promise it'll all make sense by the end. Now here's my favorite part. This is where the fun begins, because it starts to get real controversial. It involves finance and corporate speak, so just make sure you're paying attention, because you could get lost in this. I would not blame you. Mike Z outlines in his countersuit to Mariel and Francesca that there was a conscious and premeditated effort to either oust him from Lab Zero or disrupt their contracts in order to launch a new company. Well, the new company, Future Club, was launched exactly 28 days after everyone quit and was composed entirely of ex-Lab Zero employees, and Skullgirls IP holder Autumn Games, along with the mobile publisher Hidden Variable. But there's a little more to the story than that. Let's start it from the top. On March 9th, 2020, Mike Z became the sole shareholder of Lab Zero. According to Brian June, an ex-employee, it was never intended for Mike to own all of Lab Zero games, but it was transferred from the previous co-owner for legal safety, while offering them equity sharing. But before they could finalize the paperwork to distribute the equity, they were presented with a series of PR disasters. On approximately March 13th, Lab Zero would enter into a binding deal memo with their publisher Focus for a game codenamed Durian. This would include various installment payments to Lab Zero to help fund the game, as well as payroll for their staff, which included a $200,000 reimbursement on August 25th. Remember that date because it'll become important later. On June 29th, BunnyAyumi would post her DMs with Mike, spawning a multitude of other stories about his interactions throughout the years. This would put his integrity as a leader and a member of the community into question. On June 30th, Francesca schedules a team meeting without Mike from 11 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. and a team meeting with Mike from 11:45 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Mike mentions that in the meeting with him, all the employees were encouraged to bash and confront him to his face, breeding animosity. Also, that Mariel and Francesca both allegedly repeatedly told him to be quiet and yelled at him, to which he cried while still having to explain his autism spectrum disorder to the entire staff. Mariel and Francesca concluded the meeting in a degrading manner, stating that it was a waste of time and didn't accomplish anything. Remember, this is only his side of events, and no one has been open to comment because of the ongoing lawsuit. The same day, when discussing drafting Lab Zero's response to all the drama, Mariel asks, would it look bad to acknowledge the good Mike has done for the company? This sort of focus on the backlash is an integral part of the discussion. In Francesca's pros/cons list on strategizing how to deal with Mike, him being fired or them leaving is presented as a pro because it'd be good PR for them in the FGC given his current situation. When discussing possibly leaving Lab Zero or taking over, Mariel mentions how if they told their publisher at the time, Focus, that Mike was being an asshole about resigning, then they might still work with them if they left. They were also confident that Hidden Variable would continue mutual business at a new company, which they actually ended up doing, before contacting marketing and other agents to discuss their options. And lastly, in their private work channel, Earl warns that no matter what, the prevailing narrative will be Lab Zero fired Mike for being awkward and socially inept. As we saw from the public's response earlier, this wasn't too far off. Good job, Earl. My point in showing all this being that even months before actually leaving, they were fully aware of the challenges and proper strategies on how to make themselves look good and which contracts they could potentially siphon from Lab Zero. Some of this took place, like, the day after the story surfaced about Mike, before any real internal investigation started. I am not much of a businessman myself, okay? But I'm guessing that when the CEO and employees of a company strategize funneling contracts to a new company without the 100% shareholders' knowledge, That's fairly unethical. Mike was uncomfortable about them meeting without him because he, quote, didn't know what went on except secondhand info from two people who have a specific aim. The two people, of course, being Mariel and Francesca. It turns out that his concerns about the calls weren't entirely unfounded, as we'll learn in just a moment. The board of directors at Lab Zero wanted to fire Mike. There's no question about it. They talked to their partners about the logistics of a company without him behind his back, and more than likely didn't want to reward him by paying for his shares in the company to accomplish this, because they would already be inheriting the company's debt, totaling roughly $1.4 million, and his ownership was only viewed as a means to distribute employees' equity in the first place. The only thing I managed to find that they were willing to compromise on, if they stayed at Lab Zero, was leaving Mike with a small non-voting piece of equity as a consolation prize for bringing them all together. Other than that, there were even talks about slowly reducing Mike's role at the company to a contractor, so they wouldn't lose any contracts before they would eventually fire him. When Mariel and Francesca first confronted Mike after their first meeting with Focus, they told him that if he wasn't fired, Focus would part ways with Lab Zero. Which was a big deal, because they would absolutely need the $200,000 reimbursement in August for operating costs. This message was also relayed to the employees through the company Slack. However, it turns out that that wasn't the case at all, and they merely misinterpreted the explanation in their meeting. That's quite the misunderstanding. Francesca would then have to send out a notice a week later to clarify that they didn't explicitly say Mike had to leave for them to keep the Project Durian, and without knowing the facts of what had happened with team members, referencing their ongoing internal investigation, they couldn't judge, and it was still ultimately a Lab Zero decision as to what to do. Just like how the co-creator of Skullgirls, Alex Ahad, was removed from the company for alleged hostility, they were now attempting to do the same to Mike. His response to remove the entire board may have been a rash decision in retaliation, but it was not made to monopolize the equity, as some have insinuated. That doesn't make sense for a multitude of reasons. After this perceived deception on their part, with the meeting with Focus, trust had completely broken down within the company hierarchy. Yet still, even a week before everyone made their public resignations, Mike was in talks to distribute shares to employees. The only problem would be that it'd be considered a tax event for them to receive it, forcing them to pay just to acquire shares. And not only that, it would also run the risk of appearing like tax fraud, since Mike was the sole owner of the company and would be attempting to issue out 94% of it, which is why merging a separate company was also a consideration that they hadn't even agreed upon yet, because of all the ways discrepancies in taxes and restructuring could absolutely fuck them if it was rushed. Giving away 94% of a company is not a quick process. But this was something everyone already knew though, because they were CC'd in the same emails. Fast forward to when everyone posts about leaving the company. Look at the dates, August 23rd and August 24th. Why is that important, you ask? Because the next day, on August 25th, Lab Zero was supposed to receive $200,000 according to their deal in March with Focus Entertainment. Now with all these lead animators and creatives gone, they could no longer deliver on their contract for Durian, meaning that they're no longer getting shit, and are also potentially on the hook for all the money they'd already received. That's if Mariel's summary of their meeting with Lab Zero's agent is accurate. This was the money that was supposed to help them get by while developing their new game, and now they had nothing. One detail I didn't know, though, was that according to Mike, Francesca also made the budget spreadsheet that showed they'd need that money in August for operating costs, and to distribute payroll, of course. She and Mariel would also confirm with a lawyer prior to exiting the company that Lab Zero would be forced to declare bankruptcy and sell all their assets if the deal fell through. But that's not even the funniest part. The ex-employees then start shitting on Mike because he has to lay everyone off and can't immediately agree on a severance package. Oh my fucking god. It's insane. It's actually insane, because their actions directly caused the loss of contracts and pay for their old coworkers. But it's cool because they fundraised the money they would have never needed if they didn't make a public spectacle and organize all quitting at the same time, literally a day before they could have gotten a paycheck. You can't make this shit up. We've been going pretty hard on the Future Club gang, but it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows on Mike's end. I reached out to Kim MacAskill, who had ran her own separate investigation of internal affairs, to see what the primary issue was in order to help convince employees on strike who already wanted to return to the company they'd invested years in. However, this was allegedly conducted under the issuance of false pretenses from Mike's lawyer. But after years of development and time to reflect, here is her updated retrospect of the situation, in full for complete transparency.
The whole
full story of my involvement is as follows. Firstly, I'd never heard of this company before. I've never played their games. I still haven't. I had recently outed a well-known AAA studio for harassment, and during the same month I was processing the brutal fallout, I was contacted by Andrew, company lawyer, who explained he was looking to hire a consultant for a company that was struggling with culture issues, and as he'd seen what I did with Rocksteady, he thought I'd be ideal. In his words, "We don't know if we will be able to keep the lights on by the end of the week. So Kim, to quote Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope." He actually said that. I feel sick thinking about it now. The problem laid out to me was that the staff had gone on strike due to alleged inappropriate remarks and issues regarding the company boss, Mike. Andrew informed me that Mike also struggled being on the spectrum, but unlike the company I had outed, Mike actually wanted to make things right, even if it meant stepping down. In short, he just wanted to save the company. So I thought, sure, that's admirable in a way, right? And Andrew is a company lawyer, so I'm obviously being informed properly. I was not, and it taught me some things. From this plea, I took from Andrew's version that the staff wanted to work at Lab Zero and had passionately invested years there, not to mention had shares, so I believed I could help mediate a solution. I had imagined that my role would have been talking to them, taking their wants and needs, and relaying it back to the lawyer. I was offered a total of 1K GBP for assisting in this way. I was also told that once staff agreed to come back, that I'd be offered a COO role or stocks, etc. I made it clear I wasn't interested in the COO role, as frankly, those aren't my type of games. I was open to taking a small amount of stock if I did indeed help in saving a company that, at the time, I believed wanted to be saved by everyone, staff included. In getting to work, I was given the contact sheet of all the staff by Andrew, and contacted them individually to introduce myself, offer support, empathize, relay what Mike/Andrew had said, and asked how I might help in getting them back to Lab Zero. The responses were varied. Some were polite, but to the point of them having no interest. One was disappointingly hostile from someone so senior, and one particular employee must have sensed I wasn't fully informed and took the time to explain to me that Mike's behavior had caused far more complicated issues than I'd realized. It was at this point I also learned that staff members were so hurt that they had sought their own lawyers, something you'd think Andrew would tell me. In talking to the staff, there were light chats on inappropriate behavior that could, through a questionable lens, be regarded as sexual harassment. But to be frank, I was never given a story that seemed undeniable. What was absolutely consistent in those willing to speak to me was that the staff were mostly angry at broken promises regarding shares and money. From my perspective, it seemed that the main two women had teamed up, bowed out, and following this, the rest left immediately or left eventually. Again, the exact timing, context, and sensitivities of events I could have wrong. I was, after all, lied to. The email you've got is my first one that, as you can likely tell, is pissed off. It was starting to become apparent that I'd been picked up, told a fleet of staff wanted to come back to the studio, but the owner who struggled with spectrum-based behaviors was willing to stand down and make things right. Instead, I was launched into a sea of people who were confused and angry that I was in touch, as they never wanted to return. And the extent of Mike's behavior was far more financial and toxic than this lawyer relayed. The email I sent was pissed off and confused, as I wanted Andrew to reply to me with something to make it all make sense. The response did not deliver, and I only got more pissed off. At myself, mostly. Andrew's behavior as a lawyer was exceptionally bizarre, as he really did lie a lot, and I've never encountered that with a company lawyer. In my opinion, he needs struck off immediately. I was undeniably used at a vulnerable time, and I was played in this scenario, which resulted in me creating a post of me blasting both Mike and Andrew for what they lured me into. Andrew contacted me immediately upset about it, but I didn't care. I'm not an angel in life, but in this case, they both took advantage of whatever good nature I have on a subject that clearly mattered to me, and made me feel like I could make a difference to some struggling employees who were, in Andrew's words, hurting like I was. I did not know what I was entering was a war zone with lawyers on both sides across subjects I'd never been told about. It was an absolute waste of a week for me, and given I was mentally quite downtrodden by Rocksteady, I will never forgive what they asked of me, what their real agenda was, and the anger they were willing to subject me to at such a fragile time. I am an avid advocate of how employees are treated. Heck, I even turned down a lifetime achievement because the event sponsor was the company I outed, and I used the bowing out to ask them to apologize. I never received a penny from either Andrew or Mike in the end, never mind stocks or shares. For me, this was a learning experience, and not assuming the position of human ambivalence just because someone tells me there's hurt going on. It should have been a dream scenario. Drop in, save the day, take a little bit of money, which I thought was perhaps the start of a new profession, to be frank. I did think I'd maybe move from creative to cooperative and fixing studio culture issues, so this all felt like a step in the right direction. I was naive in taking Andrew's version and offering my help, and I absolutely regret it. From the really kind employee who took the time to talk to me in more depth, I learned just how crooked the company was. My biggest memory amidst all the financial talk, Mike didn't believe in the good of an HR department and refused to have one. Some of the staff believed I may have actually been Mike, under a fake account. And even now, I hold concerns that you may not be a real journalist. You could be him, for all I know. As for the other two women, one of their replies was the hostile one, and I can only say that from her reply alone, I believe there was immaturity and ego on both sides. I can't say for sure that their interests were anything other than finance-related, but while this was the main gripe, the headline was that Mike was sexually inappropriate. It was all a bit chaotic, and I absolutely accept I may not hold all the relevant information, as I ceased not long after talking to the staff when I realized how hoodwinked I'd actually been. What I saw was the pure mutiny of a man who promised things he didn't deliver. Emotions were running high among them all, and I was absolutely not prepared. So this is my story on the matter. It was a misfire of trust on my part. I was lied to, and I regret having any involvement. I do hope that everyone involved found some peace in the matter. For me, I left a bit more jaded in helping people so quickly. Bit sad, really. Hope this helps. I want to sincerely thank Kim for taking the time to respond to this. In as much detail as she did, she really didn't have to. And I did explain to her that it was for a YouTube video before she gave permission to share it, because as she said earlier, she wasn't sure if I was a journalist, but I made sure to be very clear about that. As someone with a fresh perspective and firsthand knowledge of this case, it was incredibly insightful, and it genuinely makes me upset that she wasn't compensated for it. A couple weeks later, the new company Future Club, headed by some familiar faces, would announce work on the IP that made Lab Zero popular, Skullgirls, and they were continuing work with Autumn Games, since they owned the IP, and Hidden Variable, the publisher for their mobile game. I think the deal with Focus fell through, but that's Mike's problem. They also were able to finally accomplish their dream of equal equity distribution for employees, allowing them to all profit from their labor and contribute to decision-making on a level playing field. 2 days after Future Club launched, one of their game devs, who was an ex-employee of Lab Zero, told Mike over Discord that what people wanted was majority in the company, and some were tired of waiting. However, as we all know, it wasn't even Mike's fault it was delayed. They were still consulting with their corporate counsel all the way into August because they had to figure out how to avoid committing tax fraud. If it's true that the call-out posts were in part fueled by the shares of the company rather than the alleged decade of harassment and mistreatment of employees, I have a serious problem with that. Because before Mike decided he didn't want to just up and leave, the same people alleging years of harassment defended him in private on the subjects that sparked the internal investigations to begin with. Take the BunnyAyumi situation, for example. When Mariel confronted Mike after he pointed out a perceived double standard because Bunny initiated with a sexual topic, he says, "I was trying to avoid talking to her about 99.9% of all the ways in which she presents herself. I wasn't trying to get in her pants or get nudes or whack off to her or whatever. I give up." Mariel responded with, "I know, and I get that," but further rationalized her criticisms by saying, "I think the thing is that men have treated women so poorly for so long, not you, just historically, that as a result, I think we do have to accept things like this. And the truth is that all men have to deal with the result of what shitty men have done." Okay. Additionally, Francesca verbatim tells Mariel that, "I think this girl baited Mike, and I'm not saying it is okay, I just think she sort of started the conversation off really weird." However, none of this nuance is present during the mass exodus from the company. It's even brought up in Mariel's resignation post, after she herself disagreed with Bunny posting it in the first place, and there's no mention anywhere of how her, the CEO, and other employees questioned its severity and intent. It's only described as inappropriate DMs now. She goes from considering Mike a friend and not even knowing if what she experienced was harassment, straight into, I tolerated years of sexual comments about my body and clothes, uncomfortable jokes, and unwanted hugs. And if I wanted to keep my job, I felt like I had to just deal with it. Those are two very contrasting scenarios, because one describes current uncertainty and the other describes prolonged certainty of a situation she was not yet certain about. You're telling me a 1-month internal investigation at the same company you've been working together for 10 years between the same employees you see on a daily basis taught you more about him than those 10 years of countless personal conversations and workplace interactions? Well, I'm sold. Case closed, guys. See you next year. Until next time, or whatever, fuck it, I don't care. Regardless, it seems like, along with Mariel, the others who left had a huge issue with comments of a sexual nature made in the workplace, and boundaries being consistently crossed. However, it must be a Halloween miracle, because we just keep getting lucky. Within Mike's 207-page declaration, we actually do have some of that evidence. So let's be fair and see if what they talked about on a daily basis lines up with their complaints about Mike's behavior. Sit back, grab some candy, and get mounchin', because there's a lot to go over. January 16th, 2017. Mariel, I wish escorting was legal. That's a different topic though. Mike, escorting is legal, prostitution isn't. Oh, right. Yeah, I wish prostitution was legal. April 22nd, 2019. Francesca, man, I feel really overwhelmed. Mike, can I help? Like I'm a failure type overwhelmed. You know the did you plug it in question I'm gonna ask first, right? Smiley face. It's not that. I had my period last week. Well then, would you like to talk on break? I'm getting you Steam info, but I'm available after that. August 30th, 2016. Mike, thanks. I appreciate the honesty. What does the rest of the Japanese scene think? Also, with regards to his damage, with the current change, gravity scaling, how much does he lose? And if it's not too much of a pain, could you either record or write out the new combo? Earl, I'll send that, smiley face. By the way, look in the bag on the floor to your left. I didn't even realize, but it's basically cock and balls. Oh, you thought that was it? You might want to slow down on that candy, champ. I see ya. There's plenty left in that pillowcase. We're just getting started. February 22nd, 2019. Mariel, well, I mean, my first exposure to porn was my dad's heavy metal magazines. So no, he has no problem with it. Mike, this is not a magazine I am familiar with. Or looking up here. Smiling tongue out emoji. People are people. Yep. Oh, really? It's, Then she links the porn and says, it was a long-running sci-fi fantasy erotica magazine. February 18th, 2020. Mike, do you need a hug and food? You seem very visibly annoyed today. Francesca, I realized it's mostly delayed effect of redacted, and also my period is in 4 days. Am I missing something here? Or is it normal to talk about your period this often with your coworker? Ladies, let me know in the comments. I'm trying to see something. March 8th, 2017. Earl, is that a book with your dick inside it to mark where you last left off while reading inside your pants? Or are you just happy to see me? October 23rd, 2018. Mike, I can schmooze if I have to. We signed Skullgirls without redacted. He has no idea what effort goes into what parts. You know what I mean, I think. Mariel, I could get my boobs out. Not everyone here can do that. This is the point where I say I could get my boobs out, but it wouldn't have the same effect. Or I could get your boobs out. Anyone here could indeed do that with permission, so you brought that on. Yeah, I'm not offended by that. This one is the previous CEO Peter discussing Japanese sex ed with Mariel on July 24th, 2018. Apparently Japanese sex ed is, like, worse than in Texas? But unlike Texas, it's easy to get an abortion. There's this cute, like, half hentai, half educational porn comic called Futari Ecchi, where each chapter is about a different lesson about sex. And so many of them are really wrong or weird. It's very positive about stuff and tries to cover a lot of different topics, but a lot of the ideas are also old-fashioned. May 9th, 2017. Mike, but holy shit, I'm a certified trailer driver now. Whee! Mariel, damn, I knew someone whose family owned a trailer, but everyone in the family just used it as a sex room, like parents, my friend, his sister. May 18th, 2020. Mariel, Mike, play House Party. It's a sex game. I checked just for research purposes and, yep, it's a sex game. When talking about the game Dead or Alive on December 6, 2019, Mariel, it just occurred to me that at 9, I knew I liked girls. What the fuck? Like I didn't consciously, but Mike, there's nobody short and flat. That is the reason I wanted Dead or Alive, for the boob slider. October 3rd, 2017. Mike, what has she got that you don't got in terms of ending up? Mariel, bigger booty. Also, she's strong as fuck. I can't do 1 pull-up, she can do 1,000,000, etc. What is desirable about a bigger booty? He asks in the most clinical way possible. It looks nice and strong. Also, Redacted's ex was a stick skinny. Despite having baking be her hobby, she could apparently eat whatever and people would be concerned about her weight. But she had big boobs, so maybe it just went there. Then they start talking about surgeries and Botox, etc., etc. This is a conversation about relationships on April 26, 2017, where they start talking about how much sex they've had and their experiences, and then Mariel even mentions an allergy to latex condoms before Mike points out how it was super weird to talk further about this to a girl coworker, and then attempts to shift the conversation back to Skullgirls. April 12, 2017. Mariel, you just missed a whole conversation I had with myself because you weren't listening. Mike, do you understand how confusing that sentence is? Off topic with the OMG, I just got a text that's totally a thing I can check off my life list that I didn't even know I should have on my list. Mariel, a sexy text? April 27th, 2017. Mariel, suit half bought, dress shoes good to go, bought boob tape. Mike, which half? Boob tape? They have the coat in his size, but not the pants. Gotta go to the redacted. The dress is strapless and structured, meaning if I move into any position that's not standing straight up with my chest out, there's a gap between the top and my chest. So boob tape the dress to my chest. Haha. Mike. March 24th, 2020, when talking about how censors can make an image appear more sexual, Mariel says, it's funny because most of them actually cover up more than a swimsuit does. Mike. Yeah, but it's what you think is there. I appreciate that you notice women's bodies. Okay, there's no good way to say that. Back to work for me. I'm part gay. I was raised a prude. I mean, I know that. I just have to, like, slide past sandpaper to talk about sex things. Who knows when I'm gonna step in something I shouldn't have said. I don't have much of a problem discussing sexuality as long as it isn't like my personal info or experience. I'm part gay isn't personal info? I mean, me being bi isn't news, hopefully. It wasn't, but it's personal for some. Sure, I mean, that's already out there. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't even mention just because I don't want to overdo it. This segment's already getting long enough. And I feel like you get the picture. Is it possible that Mike made inappropriate comments about his genitals or other topics that shouldn't be discussed in the workplace? Absolutely. I wouldn't even question it. Doesn't sound out of place. Seems like that might have been a thing going on, right? It's also his responsibility when he has seniority in a company, especially, to make sure that that doesn't happen. But if you look at how the employees interact within the company, I can reasonably assume this is 100% normal for everybody. They talk about their periods, sex, breasts, dicks, porn, sexuality, prostitution. Hell, I even saw talk of a threesome at one point, and none of that is appropriate. I was not even trying to, like, skew the examples I was using or anything. Mariel just has an overwhelming amount of these examples. Like, fuck, Mike went back years. He went back years. He went back years. So for her to then point the finger at Mike over sexual comments about her body, clothes, and uncomfortable jokes in general, while bringing up her porn history, breasts, and sex, all entirely unprompted on occasion, seems to lack a little self-awareness. Because all of that could just as easily be considered sexual harassment from her. It doesn't excuse anything from either side, but if we're gonna play the blame game, this is looking like fucking tug of war right now. Oh, you're telling me the guy with autism wasn't picking up on these serious boundaries when you're talking about periods, dick, and pussy 24/7? Color me surprised. The other stuff that none of them went into detail about, like intimidating and demeaning coworkers, should have been the primary focus. But since it's not, I don't have anything to go off of besides these specific sexual complaints that apply to probably all of them, if we're being honest.
Donald Trump, if you can hear us, please, Donald Trump, please save me. Please save me, Donald Trump, please. I'm asking you.
If I may speak frankly for a second, everyone here seems like a fucking jackass with an ulterior motive. It's crazy that all of this has been public for a while now, and no one seems to care. I know dick about this game and its community, and I was able to find this entire document in one Google search. Like, it's just right there. It's just right there. The best I saw was Redditors attempting to summarize it, which is, good on you, but it's a comment on Reddit. Do you know how many people on Reddit think they can write an essay? You'd have a better chance finding drugs without fentanyl at that point. This is a PSA. Parents, also make sure you're checking your kid's candy for fent. It's tasty but lethal. We were fooled into thinking Mike was an awkward but well-meaning friend, never realizing he was doing this exact thing to almost everyone. The things in question, of course, being jokes, hugs, insults, and throwing tantrums with coworkers. Mariel essentially said the same thing in both their posts. They had this same sentiment. But if he's doing the same thing with almost everyone, doesn't that just mean he's consistent and not actually doing anything different than what you've already experienced firsthand for over a decade? How is that deceptive, and why does it suddenly recontextualize your entire opinion of him as soon as equity and public image becomes an issue? Because that's what it looks like from where I'm sitting. He's gone from well-meaning and awkward to instead a manipulative bully who only does good things so he can get away with bad things. And then the community and myself are supposed to take that objective characterization uncritically and assume there's no personal influence whatsoever. Hey everybody, guess what? We've evaluated our own conduct and surprisingly found that we've done nothing wrong. Great investigation, guys. You fucking knocked it out of the park. Just like when Beezul brought probably a valid concern to the higher-ups at the company and they told him to go fuck himself. While that's funny, and I would have done the same, that's not what you should be doing at a proper company, and that's not how investigating yourself works. No one in this investigation took any personal accountability for creating the work environment they complained about, and since day one, we're already developing an exit strategy on how to fire Mike or take over the company. However, to avoid the obvious negative backlash that was already present in every thread about Mike, which they were wholly anticipating, they had to unanimously throw him under the bus to garner support for their new company and the continued support of their flagship game, Skullgirls. It is so transparent and explained in complete detail by the people doing it that I refuse to consider this a conspiracy theory. Mariel and Francesca lied about their meeting with Focus to employees and Mike himself, thus poisoning the well from the jump, when they were specifically told that the result of their own investigation would be an integral piece of information for any decision moving forward. But it was obvious by this point that most people wanted him gone anyways to avoid the PR headache. So they began negotiations for his removal, likely offered little to no payment for immediate acquisition of his shares in the company, and messaged agents to confirm the transfer of existing contracts if Mike was out of the picture. Mike was likely offended by one of these propositions and removed the entire board of directors in retaliation. This then sparked a new strategy that hinged entirely on creating a new company, but they'd also have to guarantee a project or two if they wanted any revenue. And what better way to do it than to simply continue work on the same games? Only one problem though. Lab Zero still existed. Man, if only someone had like a spreadsheet, like a budget spreadsheet that showed the exact date that Lab Zero would have the lowest funds possible, and then organized quitting all at the same time before fulfilling a contract that would guarantee they couldn't function anymore, and force them to file for bankruptcy and sell all their assets. Wait, that's exactly what happened. But I'm sure that's all just a massive fucking coincidence, and everyone involved was only doing the right thing out of the goodness of their hearts. Skullgirls was a game that brought a talented group of individuals to the forefront of indie development in the fighting game community. And they were somehow capable, for over a decade, of sparking a passionate love and appreciation for their game from players and spectators alike. However, the social climate of 2020, amidst a wave of callouts, was an unforgiving one to say the least. The livestream clip, Bunny's DMs, Carbonbae, and Beezul would all culminate into an unavoidable reckoning for Mike Z, and Mike would have to perfectly respond to all of them at the same time. A man who already struggles with basic communication would now have to flawlessly navigate a frenzied internet mob, and when his longtime friends and coworkers saw the sinking ship, he was no longer the awkward, well-meaning friend who apologized when he overstepped, but instead, a harassing liar who's gotten away with it for years by abusing his position and good deeds. But at least now, no one would be saying, Lab Zero fired Mike for being awkward and socially inept. No one's gonna come out and admit publicly that they did this to avoid getting blacklisted and Me Too'd by association, even though the CEO of Future Club literally outlined that exact reasoning as a con for staying with Mike. Because if they did admit it, they'd definitely get blacklisted. The gaming community does not forgive and forget. Let's just leave it at that. And so our story brings us to the present day, where Skullgirls is getting review bombed on Steam for quality of life changes and perceived censorship, and Mike is still considered an abuser and a creep. And if his lack of posts is any indication, he's been scared off from ever interacting online for the time being. Which is, honestly, probably for the best. Scary stuff, am I right? Told you it'd be spooky. I'm still waiting for the conclusion of Miriam Francesca's lawsuit with Mike, which is where I even got most of this information. It is public if you are interested in looking it up, and I'll likely be doing an update when that happens. I'm now an expert on the topic, so might as well. But if you enjoy these big projects, don't forget to subscribe for more and consider supporting me on Patreon. These long-form videos would not be possible without you guys. Seriously, thank you so much. Now in closing, my scary friends, I'll leave you with this. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Happy Halloween, and until next time.